Only 3 buildings shown in this circa 1915 view of Ann Street in Hartford, Connecticut survive today. Do you know which ones they are? Hi, this is History with me, Dan. In 2008, Ann Street in Hartford was renamed in honor of the first female mayor in the state of Connecticut, Ann Uccello, who was mayor from 1967 to 1971. The street runs north from Jewel Street and intersects Pearl, Asylum, Allen, and Church Streets before passing on a bridge over Interstate 84. Before the highway was built, the street had continued straight at this point, but the modern bridge veers to the northeast and connects to Pleasant Street, so that one has to make a quick left turn and then a quick right turn to continue north on Ann, which then proceeds until it ends at Main Street. Ann Street was first laid out between Main and Church Streets in 1815. Through the land of James and Nathaniel Goodwin, who named the street after their mother, Ann Sheldon Goodwin. The street was extended to Asylum in 1842, and there was also a separate section that extended south from Pearl Street towards Bushnell Park. For the next 80 years, the desire of many to connect these two parts of Ann Street was blocked, until finally, in 1922, the street was pushed through the section between Asylum and Pearl. In this video, I'm going to focus on the section of Ann Street north of Asylum Street and south of the highway. Today, a group of historic buildings, which includes St. Patrick's St. Anthony Roman Catholic Church, clusters on the west side of the street near the intersection with Allen Street. The east side of the street between Asylum and Church Streets is dominated by the Civic Center, which was built in the 1970s as the Hartford Civic Center and is soon to be renamed again. The rest of Ann Street in this area is dominated by parking lots. But what was this area like before the urban renewal of the 20th century transformed it? Let's start with the northwest corner of Ann and Asylum Streets, which is now a parking lot. This was the site of Hartford's first high school building, a relatively modest 3-story structure dedicated in December of 1847. The school occupied the building until it moved to new quarters on Hopkins Street in 1869. A new building would replace the old school at the corner of Ann and Asylum. Erected in 1871, it was an impressive 5-story commercial structure with a grand mansard roof. It was originally called the Foster Block because it was erected for Foster and Company wholesale grocers. In 1905, it was acquired by Colonel Patrick Donahue, who renamed it the Weldon Building. He was married to Catherine Weldon Donahue, and his son was named Weldon as well. The building was torn down in 1982, and the area is now a parking lot. At the time this photograph was taken, in the early 1970s, during the construction of the Civic Center, the Weldon Building was still there but had long since lost its original mansard roof. Just north of it was a 4-story building erected in 1908 that has also since been torn down. This brings us to the first of 3 buildings on Ann, south of the intersection with Allen Street, that still survive today. Designed by Hartford architect Russell F. Baker, the furthest south of these buildings was built in 1912, and the following year was tenanted by the Morse Business College. Later called the Morse School of Business, the company had started as the Bryant and Stratton College in 1860. And was later taken over by E.F. Morse. As I mentioned in my video about the history of Pratt Street in Hartford, the school had most recently occupied the former Hartford Female Seminary building on Pratt before it moved to Ann Street. On Ann, it would have a brand new building which Morse advertised as Quote, 2 blocks east of Union Depot and 2 blocks west of City Hall, just near enough to the city's center for convenience, just far enough removed to escape a city's temptations. Unquote. The Morse School of Business would continue at this location until 1999. Adjacent to it is a much smaller 2-story commercial block erected in 1895. It is well known in Hartford as the home of the Russian Lady, an icon of the city's nightlife. The nightclub opened in 1977 and has had a number of different owners and reopenings since then. The current version of the Mother Russia sculpture on the building's roof is a recreation of the original, which was sold at auction in 2002. The original, sculpted by Edmund Schultz Beckham of Bronxville, New York in 1915, was originally placed on the Rosia Insurance Company building, which stood at the corner of Broad Street and Farmington Avenue. Next to the Russian Lady is the 1894 Masonic Temple, which was designed by architect Brooks M. Lincoln and has elaborate Gothic architectural details. Next north, across Allen Street, is a 4-story building erected in 1911. Designed by Isaac A. Allen, Jr., it was originally home to the Hartford Wire Works. The furthest north of the cluster of surviving buildings along the west side of Ann Street is St. Patrick St. Anthony Catholic Church. The original St. Patrick's Church, built in 1851, had stood here until it was gutted in a fire in January of 1875. It was replaced by a new church designed by the same architect, Patrick Keeley. The church was restored after a fire on December 30th, 1956, the day before another fire destroyed St. Joseph's Cathedral on Farmington Avenue. St. Patrick and St. Anthony parishes merged in 1958. North of the intersection with Church Street, Ann Street became more residential. A Greek Revival house built in 1841 once stood on the west side of the street, originally the home of merchant John W. Bull and later of Henry A. Whitman. It was torn down in 1896 to make way for St. Patrick Catholic Parochial School. The school's original 2-story building on Allen Street had been erected in 1865. The new building of 1896, designed by the architect John J. Dwyer, was much larger. It eventually became St. Patrick St. Anthony School after the parishes merged. Sadly, the building was torn down in 1982, and the area is now a parking lot. On the other side of the street, at the northeast corner of Ann and Church Streets, stood the Hotel Hartford. Designed by Bailey and Goodrich of Hartford, it was built in 1899 to 1900 as a 4-story apartment building hotel called Lenox Court. The main entrance in the center faced the corner, and there were matching recessed entrances along the Ann Street and Church Street sides of the building. The Lenox hit hard times during the Great Depression, and it was vacant by the late 1930s. In 1941, it was acquired by new owners and was redubbed the Hotel Hartford. By the early 1980s, the hotel had again declined. It was in a rundown condition, but had become a haven for over 100 impoverished permanent residents. For years, the city grappled with what to do about the dilapidated building, but faced the difficult issue of how to rehouse its low-income tenants who had nowhere else to go. Finally, in 1986, after significant cracks appeared along the south wall, the building was quickly evacuated, declared structurally unsound, and demolished. This aerial photo shows the Hotel Hartford at the corner of Ann and Church Streets. Across the street and to the north is St. Patrick St. Anthony School, and directly across from that, on the same side and north of the Hotel Hartford, just south of the highway, was a 3-story commercial building designed by Edward M. Stone. Erected in 1927, it has also since been demolished. Let's now turn to the buildings that occupied the future site of the Hartford Civic Center. This circa 1919 view shows Ann Street north from Asylum Street. The buildings on the right are where the Civic Center is located today. On the corner was the heavily ornamented building erected for the Hartford Life Insurance Company in 1897. It was destroyed in a fire in 1963. I talk about the building extensively in my video on Asylum Street before the Excel Center, which I'll link in the description below and at the end of this video. In that video, I also talk about how this corner had previously been the site of the home of the influential Episcopal Bishop Thomas Church Brownell. This circa 1915 view south down Ann from Allen Street towards Asylum shows the future Civic Center area on the left. At that time, there was a row of 19th century commercial structures north of the Hartford Life Insurance Building. On the corner of Allen was the Loomis Block, which consisted of two sections, the southern section of 4.5 stories and the northern section of 3.5 stories, both sections having mansard roofs. The Loomis Block was demolished in 1940. Allen Street only extends eastward as far as Ann Street today, but before the Civic Center was built, it continued past Ann to Trumbull Street. I also have a video on Allen Street before the Excel Center, which I will also link below and at the end of this video. Just north of the intersection with Allen Street was a 3-story Italianate commercial building. This photograph shows the Loomis Block and the Italianate building in the background, but the focus is on the self-propelled steam fire engine called the Pride of Hartford. Built by the Y.W.C.A Engine Company of Manchester, New Hampshire, it was purchased by the Hartford Fire Department in 1901 and remained in service until about 1930. The engine was photographed here because this was right in front of Engine Company 4's building at what was then 60 Ann Street. Engine Company No. 4 was where the apparatus was stationed. In 1927, after the company relocated to the new Fire Department headquarters building on Pearl Street, the former fire station on Ann was sold to a private owner. From 1934 until 1964, it was home to M. Gilston Incorporated, which sold laundry and dry cleaning equipment and supplies. This is a modern photograph showing the area where Engine Company No. 4's building once stood. And this is another photograph of the same area back at the start of the 20th century. In the distance, it shows the Greek Revival-style home of Mrs. Edwin Strong, which was at the corner of Ann and Church Streets, north of the engine house. This vicinity is illustrated in part of the 1877 bird's eye view of Hartford, which shows the engine house with its rear tower and the Strong house next door. This photograph from 1916 is a view east down Church Street from Ann Street. On the left is Lenox Court, later the Hotel Hartford. On the right is the Strong house. This side of Church Street is now the north side of the Civic Center. The Strong house has a sign displaying the letters W.C.A. That's because in 1912, the building was acquired by the Young Women's Branch of the Women's Christian Association, of which Mrs. Strong was a member. It was intended by the association to eventually build a Y.W.C.A. clubhouse and headquarters here. By the time of this photo of the same location in March of 1917, the Strong house had been demolished. The Y.W.C.A. building, completed in 1918, is shown here a year later on the right in yet another view down Church Street. The 5-story building, designed by the New York architect Louis E. Jalade, remained in use by the Y.W.C.A. less than a decade, because in 1927 the organization moved to Broad Street, to a new home where its neighbor would be the Rosia Insurance Company, original location of the Russian lady's Mother Russia sculpture. Back in 1919, the G. Fox and Company building and the top of the steeple of Christ Church Cathedral were visible in the distance down Church Street. G. Fox didn't appear in the previous images from 1916 or 1917 because it wasn't completed until 1918, the same year as the Y.W.C.A. building. This is a view of the same area today. This view down Ann Street from Asylum Street shows the lost 1919 Y.W.C.A. building and Lenox Place in the distance on the right. The area looks very different today, over a century later. I hope you enjoyed this video about the many changes over the years in this section of Ann Street. If you want to learn more, the video on the left is about Allen Street before the Civic Center, and the one on the right is about Asylum Street before the Civic Center. Please remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.